Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting DC Domingo number 28. It's another crazy week. We have quite a bit of stuff to talk about. I wasn't going to do like a weekly show, but we've had a lot of news, so might as well cover them and kind of make a sense out of all this. We got 10 topics for you. The first one, just a big shout out to Brian Azzarello. Second item is going to be how Disney treats their employees. Third item, it's going to be a nice multifaceted thing about Vero social. The fourth one is going to be the Sandman Universe. Fifth one, Batgirl, the movie news and stuff like that. Number 6 is going to be Shazam, some of the leaked pictures. 7 is Wonder Woman 2 casting. Number 8 is Matt Reeves and the DCEU stuff. Number 9 is ties back to number 1 because Brian Azzarello did a collaboration with Frank Miller for The Dark Knight 3 Master Race, and I'm going to do a review. I'm also going to be debuting a rating system for comics, which it's kind of similar to my film review method, if you've been paying attention. And I'll include it there so you guys can check it out. And the last thing I will talk about is my Oscar, nomination, my Oscar pick for who I think should win. That's pretty obvious, but I spent, pretty much most of the day yesterday writing a lengthy blog about all the other movies that came in. So I'll link you guys up to it, and hopefully you guys, check out some of the movies that I recommend, because some of my top 10 are not even in the top 10 of like the New York Times or, the Academy. So I have a different taste than what most people think. So let's get started. Warning. The following podcast contains politics, leftist politics, the whole truth, justice, American way thing. We live in a time where one has to post this. Progress is a dirty word, such as science and reason. My superheroes would weep. This podcast contains naughty language as well. As someone who writes and makes comics, it's always good to read something that you're really happy, and being able to tell the people on social media who actually made it, congratulations. One of the things that I have found is that I don't know what's going on with social media, but when they have like a media darling, they always have like a media bias against certain creators. And I think it's the exposure of Frank Miller with Sin City, and the fact that he directed The Spirit and didn't pan out in Hollywood has made a lot of hipsters who write about Hollywood kind of dislike him without ever having to actually give a damn about the man's work. One of the things that I have noticed is that a lot of people don't really care, about some of the creators. They just want to get their voice out there without knowing shit. So I reached out to Brian Azzarello. I laid out all the comics, even like the mini comics that Frank Miller has in his in this collaboration, and I said, hey, thank you for this wonderful collaboration with Frank Miller. it was a treasure to enjoy. He seemed to like it. One of the nice things about it is that it's nice, to get recognition and get appreciated. Because most of the time, people on Twitter are just being dicks to creators. It's like, oh, you said you didn't like the color orange. What's the fuck's wrong with you? It's like, hey, whatever. So it is very nice. And, I want to be able to have these kind of relationships with fellow writers and fellow comic book artists. Because we spend way too much time making these. And it's often quite nice to just read one that kind of goes, wow, this is great. So I'll have a review on that one at the end of the podcast. Alrighty. Big shout out to Anchorman, who is part of the Inner Circle podcast for Xbox. He likes comic books, movies, and stuff like that. And, it's kind of ironic that he posted this at the time that this news came out. Let's see. What? Marvel just dropping bombs like this without regard for human life. And I think it was, something with the box office success. And, I posted this where it's an article about some Disneyland employees that actually struggle to pay for food, shelter, and even are homeless. So it was kind of a timely post about without regard for human life, because while the movies that, Disney and Marvel make, their employees are going kind of to shit. If you remember the previous podcast, I mentioned how it was, or maybe I didn't mention, but I might have mentioned it, I don't know. A similar thing happened about a week and a half, perhaps 2 weeks ago, where Disney employees were offered a $1,000 bonus in exchange for not raising wages for quite some time. And a lot of people felt that they were duped. If they didn't take the bonus, they were going to get fired, or the staff was going to get short-staffed. And this survey says the majority of these people are elderly and also, part of a minority group. So while, people on social media are very, pro Black Panther and pro minorities, they're kind of not getting the voices heard of these employees, most of which are Filipino or Latino in Anaheim, and Latino and African American in Miami, where Disney World is located. So, it's one of those things where people like to talk about the happy things, but they don't want to talk about the reality. And, I don't like to be a dick on Twitter or anything. I could have just, posted this link to everybody who's, happy with the success of, Black Panther. But I think that that's not how you get your point across, So hopefully, people will look at the news and kind of, force Disney to pay better to their employees. Because one thing that is sadly neglected since the 50s are unions. And that's the only way to be sure that you get a good paying job. If you want to make it about comic books, imagine, the Avengers forming a group to get better wages. Think of it like that. One of the coolest things is that in the last week, because Zack Snyder's birthday was coming up, a lot of people felt the need to, wish him happy birthday. And while his activity on Twitter is kind of gone away, there is a new app called Vero Social. And because of that, a lot of people started to wonder, hey, what's this? And it actually became the top app of the week from iTunes. And, like all the trendy hipster fuckers are like, hey, what's this? So Vero experienced, a surge in users. And Vero is definitely like a combination of Twitter and Instagram. However, there is no bullshit algorithm to sell you shit or to market, stories for you. It's very organic, very pro-user friendly, and I would say is more like a libertarian app. No left wing, right wing. It's just straight up, which is kind of interesting because it kind of gets rid of all the bullshit. And it was trending really high. To the point where most of the people who didn't even give a fuck about it, as soon as they found out it was like something that Zack Snyder used, either if they're pro Zack Snyder, they kind of like, proposed their fans to follow it and just promote it. But if they were anti Zack Snyder, they were just talking shit about it. One of the other supporters of Vero is the Clay Enos photographer. He is the photographer on most of the the later DC movies by Warner Brothers, and even he criticized some of the haters because they weren't really criticizing the app or how user friendly it is or anything. They're just more criticizing Zack Snyder and by association the app, which is kind of bullshit. But that was interesting that something that Zack Snyder uses has become kind of way too popular just because of his birthday. One of the interesting things is that the official Game of Thrones profile started to follow me. I think I posted a picture of a very old map of my hometown that I saw in a really beautiful hotel in downtown. So yeah, I'm gonna keep posting cool pictures there. You guys can follow me if you want to. I'll link it up maybe in the description, and you guys can follow me there. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. If you want like a more user-friendly Twitter, Vero is there for you. Now, if you're a fan of the DC Universe and you whether or not you started prior to the New 52 or after the New 52, you might have noticed the amazing map that Grant Morrison developed, the multiverse map, which is really interesting. I know that DC Access had a wonderful video describing all different realms of the multiverse, one of them being an universe for the Sandman characters, from Neil Gaiman. So it didn't came to me as a surprise when Neil Gaiman announced the Sandman Universe, featuring 4 new books that will continue to explore some of the familiar places and new places. I don't think it's much more of a cash grab than anything else. I think that Neil Gaiman really has a powerful imagination, probably invigorated by millions of fans who meet him all the time and say, hey, this is a wonderful story, and I have a question. What if this, and that? And I think that's how Neil Gaiman, gets more of his amazing love and encouragement to keep doing this. Because, DC and Vertigo could have just hired trendy hipsters to do this, 5 to 10 years ago. So, I like the fact that Neil Gaiman himself, made a video kind of explaining what it was going to be about, and it seems very sincere. I am looking forward to it. I know that my girlfriend's a giant fan of it. I think it's the quintessential American comic book. And British, because he's British. One of the things that I always point to people is that, yes, Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns are very quintessential, but so is The Sandman. It's like the holy trilogy of American comics, that made the comics what they are today. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the Sandman Universe, and hopefully, we start to get more than just 4 titles. I like to see what they're going to come up with. All right, regarding Joss Whedon and the project Batgirl, the movie, I think it's interesting because here's what happened. A lot of media have said that he was not fired, that he left. And that media is very pro-Marvel. So if you see, any kind of DC-related podcasts who are like, oh yeah, Joss Whedon dropping out of Batgirl movie, you can kind of tell what kind of brainwash bullshit they've been reading, because he was fired. And this was confirmed not only because Patty Jenkins liked a tweet that said he was fired, but also Zack Snyder liked a tweet that said he was fired. And these are two people who are actually involved in the media industry. The people that said that Joss Whedon left the project are media that are very pro-Disney, like IO9, Gizmodo, and, even Collider, which are, garbage. So it's very interesting, how that brainwashing kind of takes effect even on some, some of the pro-DC websites out there. And, if you have the history of Joss Whedon writing strong female roles, how the fuck do you not find a story for Batgirl? That's what he claims, that he didn't find a story for Batgirl. And this is a character that wasn't a TV show in the 60s. I'm pretty fucking sure you have plenty of stories to choose from. And like I said on the last blog, you can ask, like, hey, Matt Reeves working on Batman, how do you see Batgirl? Give me some pointers and then maybe I can work on that. You can go to David Ayer. It's like, hey, are you going to film the scene where Joker injures Batgirl into the wheelchair? Can I film that? Can I include it in my movie? And you start to talk to people, like, maybe one fucking weekend. But yeah, I think he was just fired. I think the way he handled Justice League after Zack Snyder's departure was a big indicator that he's not that keen working with DC Comics. I might even go as far as to say is that he's like corporate espionage, and I might even do a little segment on it because there's too many coincidences that don't add up. So I'm glad that he fucking left, and some of the tasteless jokes that his cinematography shows kind of make him kind of a fake feminist. Even his ex-wife was like, he only pretended to be a feminist to fuck other women. Make that as whatever you want. I'm just glad he's not, touching the characters that we care anymore. Now, this picture, I would have talked about it last podcast, but I didn't, just because I didn't really want to talk about it. However, the picture has been, leaked, and it has become part of our lexicon for about a week, and it won't go away. It is a leaked image from a distance of DC's Captain Marvel, originally from Fawcett Comics. It looks very, very accurate. I seem to recall the amazing Alex Ross painter also kind of giving it its approval by releasing a similar image of one of his paintings. And I have a big shout out to give to DC Comics Mexico fans, just because they're kind of like me. We Mexicans don't deal with a lot of bullshit. We don't do clickbaits. We don't do any of that shit. So the translation reads, ladies and gentlemen, adaptation. And that's what this is. The current picture of Captain Marvel looks identical to his, comic book attire. One of the things that is interesting to know is that, unlike other superheroes, for instance, Cyborg wears, material from the mother box, just metal. The Flash made his costumes from stolen goods from NASA to keep, heat away. Batman obviously has, Alfred and Wayne Tech. Diana has Amazonian armor, and Kal-El has Kryptonian chainmail, which is why, his costume looks different than other, incarnations of Superman. So we need to figure out what the costume and context is for this movie before we kind of start speculating. If I had to guess, because Billy Batson's still a kid, and by saying Shazam, he becomes, this giant superhero. It might just be that magic works differently, or maybe he had somebody create the costume for him that is very classical, spandex and stuff. If other Justice League members meet him towards the end, it might give him another costume, perhaps Kryptonian chainmail, or some kind of Amazonian, warrior garb. But it looks interesting. It looks good. The other thing that was leaked is this image, and again, another shout out to DC Comics Zone, or Zona DC Comics, just because they have these awesome shots of the leaked images of Treasure Time toys. And if you see that, there's a lot of these little marshmallows attached to these figures. It's kind of they enhance an explosion. So when you want to have like things flying towards the camera that aren't necessarily, anything important, anything damaging, you put these little things that are like styrofoam or something to kind of make the explosion seem to have more body. But the interesting thing is that they have toys of Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman, and Harley Quinn. So it's kind of interesting that in this movie you have merchandising of urban legends. So it'll be interesting to see how that came about. Kyrsten Wigg is a ex-alumni of the Saturday Night Live comedy seasons and sketch group. She is ridiculously talented. If I had to put her in context, I would definitely put her kind of akin to, Billy Murray. I know that some people either liked or didn't like Ghostbusters, but Kyrsten Wigg actually has some really good, serious drama roles. The best one is with Chris Hader, who is also an SNL. She can actually do drama and comedy, and one of the things that she's very underrated for is her writing ability. Some of her characters that she created are not only funny, but well written. They have actual grounding relatedness to it. And I think that helps you to be a better actor. When you're a good writer and you know character, format, whether it's comedy, drama, black comedy, sci-fi, horror, whatever. And if she is, cast as, the villain in Wonder Woman 2, we'd have to see what how that's going to come about. There have been different incarnations of the Batgirl, the bad guy Batgirl, the villain of Cheeta. It is usually a friend of Diana, an archaeologist, who kind of goes, rogue, or discovers like a magical dagger that kind of turns her evil. But there are two versions. One version, it's kind of like Catwoman, where she's just human, but has like an outfit. And the other one is more sci-fi, much more mythic, where she transforms into a cat-like creature hybrid. And big shout out to Boss Logic, who is always doing like really good renditions of all these characters. Took this quick little sketch for Cheetah, and it looks really mighty impressive. It is based on the Avatar movie by James Cameron, but by changing a few things on Photoshop, it looks pretty damn awesome. So I am excited because this actress has gravitas and has really, really good relatability. So I'm pretty damn looking forward to it. If she's cast, I would like to know which version of the character they're going for. And I'm excited. I've always said that most of these creators are one click away. They have Twitter and other social media. And for about 2 weeks. The idiots known as John Campea and Batman News on Film have been saying all these rumors that the person in charge of the new Batman trilogy is actually leaving Batman because they have nothing else to fucking print. They've been saying this for 2 weeks, and Matt Reeves, who made War for the Planet of the Apes, just posted saying, it ain't so, with a smiley face, emoji, a Batman emoji, and a thumbs up. So, I don't know if we should validate these kind of shitty-ass rumors, but I've been boycotting, John Campea and Batman on Batman News for quite some time. I think that Batman News, once the Christopher Nolan trilogy ended, didn't give a damn about Batman comics, Batman video games, or Batman anything. They're too lazy, and they just want money, and they just create stupid bullshit rumors. So I'm very happy that Matt Reeves has come forward, and I can't wait for WonderCon in Anaheim and Comic-Con in San Diego to kind of just give us more news and enhance, people's expectations. So, yeah, that's really good, Matt. Alright, so major spoilers ahead for Dark Knight 3, The Master Race by Brian Azzarello, Frank Miller. Wow. One of the things that I have to say is that if you haven't read the first one or seen the cartoon, definitely check it out. And the same thing goes for the second one. The second one came out at a time when digital comics were not even a thing. But some of the coloring that was done was very pixelated. And that was on purpose. For instance, it was a very digital era, but it wasn't a portable digital era. So people didn't feel the need to give it much thought. The second Dark Knight is actually good. I'm going to actually do a review on it and kind of do the trilogy review 1, 2, 3. I'll probably include this particular review or maybe enhance it with some screen caps. But as you can see, these are all the covers of Dark Knight 3. Again, major spoilers if you haven't read the previous two. But I would say that as far as the social themes of this, one is very important. The comics have a logo of DC Comics, the old school logo and then the new school logo. They were in the transitional period between Rebirth, and it shows because there were originally fewer comics planned, but then more time was given. Some of the issues were delayed, and a lot more potent writing artistry went into it. It doesn't wane in the middle or anything, but you can just tell that they were just given more time to finish it the way they wanted. And the other changing of the guard that is quite obvious is the way that it was when it started. Obama was president. And slowly but surely, when the horror kicked in of the new commander-in-chief was portrayed as a buffoon in some of the first issues, and then later on it was just like, oh crap, what did we get ourselves into? And it's really brilliant. There isn't a lot of media mockery. The media mockery comes in the first and last issues, which I think fits the narrative. A lot of readers might feel alienated because of that. I don't. I think it's actually kind of prophetic and brilliant the way Frank Miller used to write teenagers back in the day, with words like spud or slice and dice, which is now iconic. So those kind of like, butchered English, urban lingo is now in this issue kind of exemplified with texting. how he fucked over the English language with, our texting, even in some dangerous situations. For instance, there's this kid who is getting chased by the cops. He's like, I'm gonna fucking die, and he's, he relates the story in a very, besmirched English via text, which is now kind of normal for all the young people. It is interesting that this horrible situation where this teenager was going to get beat up by the cops turns into the first sighting of Batman in a long time. And it is pretty, empowering, at first, because you're like, oh, cool. Batman's fighting police brutality. But then it goes dark because the cops just beat the shit out of Batman. It's just like, oh my God, how the fuck did this happen? And that's one of the really cool political and story-serving motifs that go hand in hand. Because in this story, Carrie Kelly has taken on the role of Batman. Obviously, Bruce Wayne's body is way too old to take it. The Man of Steel has gone into reclusion. He's just like, they got rid of all the evil, and he just kind of froze himself in the Fortress of Solitude until he's needed. His daughter is being raised by Diana, and Diana also has a new baby, also both by Superman. And, the world seemed like a better place at the end of Dark Knight 2, once they vanquished a lot of evildoers and such. The problem comes in, from the smallest of details. That is where the Atom comes in. If you're a fan of the Atom, one of my favorite things from Dark Knight 2 is that the way they introduce Ray Palmer. You see this Messiah figure who has a giant beard and a spear, he's like lost, and he's been battling these monsters for ages. You don't know who it is at first. You're like, what the hell? And then you see this giant monster attacking him. And then, you kills the monster kind of, it reminded me of Beowulf, when Beowulf took on the dragon. It was beautiful and epic. And then you realize that it's Ray Palmer fighting a bacteria or something like that. And it's so brilliant, It's one of the things that Frank Miller and Brian Azzarello, who helped him write this, kind of have developed, And it's in this one, that kind of iconic power comes back to haunt Ray Palmer because, he's always been the little guy. And he takes pity on the city of Kandor. It was a city that Brainiac, shrunk to keep in a container to preserve for eternity. So these beings, these Kryptonian beings, have been there for, quite some time. And Ray Palmer saw their distress. They're like, hey, our ecosystem is falling. Help us. We want to grow out of this, container, this bottle, and maybe we can help you guys out there on Earth. So it came from a very naive and friendly place. Ray Palmer really was like, I want to help out, and it ended up backfiring because the city of Kandor was under some weird cult. Not everybody was with it, but a cult rose to take over the city and develop the master race. So the title itself became kind of subversive, and the plot goes there. Without giving way too many spoilers, the art is really fantastic. They have different artists. Some of you recognize them in the covers. But the mini comics are all done by Frank Miller himself, who, has been very sick lately, is very old, and, they might not look like his former self, but I'm kind of applauding him for, going out of his way to still draw really amazing things. I mean, the way he draws Green Lantern will shock you because you would think like, oh, somebody might have come up with this already, but they haven't. And that's one of the gems of Frank Miller. He always finds ways to tell his story in different ways. And without giving too many spoilers, like I said, there is a brilliant part at the end of Dark Knight 3 where Superman's keen intellect comes into play. It even shocks Batman. If you're a fan of the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, where Superman fights Darkseid, and there's a beautiful monologue of like, I've always been held back, because this world seems like cardboard, but I'm gonna set loose on you, Darkseid, because it's kind of like an epic realization that, oh shit, Superman is OP as fuck, but he's always holding back because we're kind of brittle. Given that Batman is one of the DC's best tacticians and intellects, having him be wowed by what Superman's mind does, it's kind of a nice change of pace. For a lot of people that didn't like the way Superman was handled in the first Dark Knight, or even the second, in my opinion, the second and third are mostly about Batman realizing how great Superman is, and does justice to Superman quite a bit. Especially the way Superman repays Batman in this issue. So yeah, I actually reworked my grading method for movies into comics. So this is what I came up with. Impact. It's the social impact of this comic. Like I said, a lot of people just hated it because it was Frank Miller, and a lot of people just hated it because it's DC. So it only got half a point. It's not like a perfect world where something like this is universally loved. But the half a point is because people don't like Frank Miller and people don't like Marvel. I mean, people like Marvel, but not DC as much. Impression, 1 out of 1. That's my own personal impression. I really liked it. And the sincerity of this project, I think it's really palpable because they were given some of the best talents to work with. They were given time to work out all the kinks. And the fact that they included mini comics and inserted, and even Jim Lee bragged about for, several weeks about testing out different glue to preserve the paper, and doing all the laboring, engineering how to get these comics bundled together so they wouldn't be ruined. It kind of shows you a very nice sincerity. Also, I think that DC was caught off guard with Dark Knight 2. Again, some people were turned off by the colors, but also because in Dark Knight 2, their Batman sends a Batwing crashing into a building. It was like a drone. However, that comic was released the same winter as 9/11. So a lot of people used that sentiment to hate on the comic, and it kind of had nothing to do with each other. So I think the sincerity was to bring back quality to the saga. So yes. The colors, again, just look at yourself. Look at the amazing covers. That kind of level of art is what you get inside. Calligraphy, 1 out of 1. The story, I give it a 3/4 of a point, 0.75. Quite simply because I thought it needed more, a little extra, something else. I think that, and I think what that extra was, is that the mini comics kind of take away from the main story, and the main story kind of loses items and bits to the mini comics. I think in the format that DC sometimes releases, the Ultimate Edition of Watchmen, or the Ultimate Absolute. I think that's what they're called, Absolute Editions. I think once the Absolute Edition kind of bundles it up together, it will enhance it a little bit more. And, I would have liked more media as a third character, but otherwise, it's great. You can tell that the script is really solid. I think that with the story that they had and the formatting, the script developed very naturally. And some of the characters were given some pretty cool lines. The pacing gets 1 out of 1. I think that one of the reasons why I enjoy reading these kind of comics in a bundle instead of just one by one is because I'm really able to enjoy what's happening between panels, and that's as equally important as the panels themselves. So the pacing, the fact that they were allowed to have more time to finish this, clearly shows that it's a nice pacing. And did it leave me wanting more? Of course, but not out of lacking anything. Timelessness, I included this as a metric. And I think that any kind of literature that wants to be critiqued and analyzed needs this. Some people might say, well, that applies to movies as well. But that goes to the two factors of impact and impression. I think that timelessness for literature is quite different than a movie. Because in literature, you can flip pages back and forth, as Watchmen showed us. Narrative is selective on the viewer, as opposed to a movie that is very much you press forward and then that's how it goes. Timelessness for this, I think people will look back on it and kind of go, wow, how the fuck did I miss this? Or this is a great addition to the saga. In the artistic merit, 0.75 out of 1, just because, like I said, poor Frank Miller, he's really old, he's really sick, but damn, his art still, it's his. So I give him full credit, and I'm glad other artists help him out with his vision. So overall, it's 9 out of 10. And you guys should check it out. Pick up the Absolute Edition when it comes out, or the graphic novel. Alrighty, last but not least, today is Sunday, and it's the Oscars. So obviously you pretty much know that I'm pretty damn excited about, Guillermo del Toro. And big shout out to Jorge Gutierrez, who is the director of The Book of Life. He liked one of my Twitters, even though autocorrect totally fucked up my Spanish. He posted that as a member of the Academy, he's going to go to attend. It's his first time going to the Oscars. And, he's going to vote for Del Toro, and hopefully, we'll get some good Mexican representation up there. So I wrote, congratulations to both. Del Toro is buena gente, good people. We're making pambazos and enchiladas with my family on Sunday to watch the Oscars, with mucho orgullo. But, this autocorrect totally fucked it up. But anyways, here is the link below to a very lengthy blog post about my top films of 2017. Like I said in the intro, check out which movies make it and how I view movies differently. And some of the even Oscar nominees for Best Movie are not in my top 10. Some of them are just kind of like happen to be released just before the Oscars, and I don't think they deserve the attention they're getting. But they're mentioned in the honorable mentions. And some of my guilty pleasures are up there, things that just make you giddy, like King Kong, I think that you need a good quality of all three, You need Oscar-worthy movies, you need guilty pleasures, and, so-so movies that are kind of half of both. Alright, people, that's been DC Domingo number 28. Peace out, and check out the Oscars.